Hello, hello, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you? Thank you for being here.
I'm so good and I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I'm Colleen and I'm a embodied messaging coach and I'm currently based in Stockholm, Sweden. And yeah, I'm just here to chat with you about all things self-love and self-expression and I'm so excited to dive into that.
Oh my gosh, can you tell me a little bit about your business and how that got
Mm-hmm.
started and kind of what the core almost ethos of it is what
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the things that really attracted me to you and your profile was just how in tune you are with your business and how much of a personal reflection it comes across even just at first glance. You pull up your Instagram and you're like, oh my gosh, this person is their business and so emotionally and spiritually in it. So yeah, can you give us a little rundown on what it is that you do and what that looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So I think okay, the whole brand of my business is called Selfishly Expressed.
Mm.
And I think this came, I don't know if you're into human design,
I
but
know a little bit about it. I know mine. I can't say I'm the most educated.
no worries. But I was kind of in a phase where I was like, I just didn't want to be like another copywriter in the space. People who are there's nothing wrong with selling copy that converts, content that connects. But I just felt like I was selling my soul at some point. Like I've always been a writer. Growing up, I love poems and stuff like that. So joining the space where it was very revenue driven kind of drove me a bit crazy. You could do it for a while and then at some point it just feels like, oh, I'm dragging my feet to my computer and every word feels sticky.
Mm.
Um, and then I kind of dabbled into human design 2 years ago. And then I've had a couple of readings. And then some girl said, "Hey, you have this 1034 channel." I'm not the best as well. She just said 1034 channel. And she said it's the selfish channel. And it just hit me. I was like, wait, what? Like that is the undercurrent of everything that I do. Which brings us
Mm.
to the question why I started my business. I started because for selfish reasons, basically. I moved to
Mm.
Sweden for my husband, and being an Asian woman married to a white man, there are
Mm.
stereotypes. And I was like, I'm not gonna allow them to label me. I
Mm.
will be a badass business owner, making her own money. And yeah, so when people would share their rags to riches story, um, I would be like, oh God, I don't have one. I have a
Mm.
selfish story. Um, so yeah, I hope that answered your question.
I love that. Can you talk to us about what selfish means to you and
Hmm.
kind of the I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me there had to I'm assuming there had to be some sort
Hmm.
of almost reclaiming of that word because it's
Hmm.
one of those words that we hear and we kind of are
Mm.
"Ee." But yeah, I want to hear what that word means to you and what that process has been
Mm.
like because I I'm always on this kick, but especially lately, I'm always talking to my friends. I'm I love women's rights and I love women's wrongs. I
I
am
love
just
that.
I love feminine anger. I love feminine. I just love watching women or people that were conditioned to be women growing up, showing up really unapologetically and
Hmm.
experiencing these emotions or these things that historically have been labeled as maybe bad or negative. I love watching women reclaim them. And so that feels yeah, the word selfish,
Hmm.
that can have such a negative connotation. So yeah,
Hmm.
what does it mean to you? And what's kind of been your journey with that word?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think like it's a word that a lot of us grew up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Share with your sisters, with my religious bringing as well. It was very like, sacrifice driven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was someone that was very like selfish with my clothes. So that's a surface level part, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to share my clothes with my sisters. I was just like, no, but like my clothes represent me. Like, why do you want to borrow my personality? That's what it felt like to me.
Mm. Yeah.
And then I was also pretty selfish with my time, right? So it was always like, oh, I'm too selfish. I need to be like the good girl, someone that's like giving and nurturing. And it was just so tiring and performative. And it felt like I was allowing people to just dim my light.
Mm.
And hanging out with like people or like crowds that weren't really like exciting for me.
Mm.
It just felt like I was doing it because, yeah, they said be selfless and everything. So when I kind of started off this like self-love journey, which was pretty accidental, to be honest, um, I was like, you know what? I will reclaim that word because to me, being selfish is actually being selfless, right? You're
Mm.
honoring your own desires that people told you that was wrong before. Desires that were like you didn't even know existed because like, well, we just threw it out of the window because it's like not part of the good girl archetype, right?
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of like the short version of my
Yeah.
story.
How did you like, do you feel like you were met with resistance, both like within yourself or even like outwardly resistance to kind of like reclaiming that and like starting to honor that within yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for sure there was a bit of like pushback from people who knew me from before.
Mm.
They were like, you've changed. And I'm
Mm.
like, well, we're supposed to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why don't you move to another country? See what that does to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
like,
how boring to stay the same forever.
right? Exactly. Um, so there was a lot of pushback, but I was just like, since moving to a new country kind of like, I guess shook my world in a different
Mm.
way. Like there was grief from leaving my family and stuff like that. Um, and for the longest time, I had to like kind of, okay, do I let go of this identity I had? Like, how do I
Mm.
merge that with this like new life? Because like, living in Asia versus like in Sweden is so different. Like people here are more like, I guess, introverted, less loud about their personalities, and I just felt like, oh gosh, here I am again in another like box.
Mm.
And I just can't do this anymore. I'm just gonna be me, and if whoever this new version of me is, like, they're all like parts of me anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? How did you push past that? Like, how did you
Mm-hmm.
push past the like I can obviously I haven't moved from like anywhere in Asia to Sweden, but on a much more minute scale, like I
Mm-hmm.
really found myself and
Mm-hmm.
my style and my personality living in New York and
Mm-hmm.
moving to Chicago, even though it is also a big city, like it's so much more Midwestern. It's so much more quiet. The fashion is very, very like monotonous and like obviously again, like not totally comparable, but like similar ideology where it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like I almost have to like consciously make the decision to keep being myself, despite the fact that I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
stand out a lot more doing it
Mm-hmm.
here than I did in New York City. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in New York, you can obviously you can literally be whatever and no one thinks twice.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit jarring. Like, how did you push through that? How did you like what
Mm-hmm.
came up for you while
Mm-hmm.
being in kind of this new, more tame, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
culture? Like what's that been like?
So it's been quite a ride.
Mm-hmm.
I think not a lot of people would be like willing to, I guess, go against the flow here, right? But there are spaces. They're tiny, tiny spaces, but there are there with like people who are fuck the paradigm kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think when I became more intentional about it and just like, oh gosh, like, so Sweden is pretty known for like they're very yoga people,
Okay.
like love and light. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, love and light people. I love yoga, but they're very love and light. And I found myself falling into that space, which was nice. And I was just like, ah, but you know, the world isn't always love and light. Right? I was like trying to look into like these little corners. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's like people here who feel the same. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's the same in the online space when we're like, should I say this? You know, maybe no one will get it. But like, even if you just make one person feel seen, that is everything, right? You validated that person. Um, and yeah, I guess that's my way of like, that's how I kind of navigated it. And it's just slowly speaking up and using my voice. Um, I think usually, like, for example, there was like a time in like a restaurant and then someone was like gonna take the table I was waiting for, but
Mm-hmm.
they already had a table. And I was like, no, 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 excuse me. Like, I'm taking this table. I was just like slowly using my voice and just like, sorry, like, just, I'm not from here, so I don't care. I will speak
Yeah.
up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I've kind of navigated. Yeah.
No, I love the idea of like dipping your toe into it because it really is like, I think as women, especially, like we have been raised as to not speak up, not cause a scene. Whenever I talk about like feminine rage, I'm like women are taught to like avoid anger like the plague because if we touch it, we're a bitch, or like if we speak up, we're a
Yeah,
bitch. And so even like your personality aside, like you could be the most outspoken woman ever, but even just like culturally, like we have been so
mm-hmm.
trained to stay quiet and like not cause a scene and be a peacemaker of sorts. So like add on top of that, maybe you are more introverted or soft spoken, or like maybe you haven't gotten into the practice yet of like really leaning into yourself, into your voice. What do you recommend for people who are wanting to like start that journey? Like maybe they are realizing that they've just kind of either gone along with things or they've been keeping things in. Like, I guess two questions. Like, one, what do you think like the symptoms of that are? Like, were there symptoms of almost like, oh, like this is happening a lot and I think it's because I've been like not leaning into myself. Like how can people catch it and like realize that they've been doing this? And then like where do you start? Like how do you even start that journey?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is very intimidating. Like it's like building a muscle, truly.
It is. It is definitely like building a muscle. So I guess a symptom would be like, this is something I say a lot, is like people who use the same words as everyone.
Mm,
I think that's a huge symptom because like, why don't you want to create your own words or like create your own phrases to be remembered by? And I think people are like, oh, okay, if I use this word, like let's say quantum leap, right? Like,
mm,
everyone has used that word. Quantum leap, like, oh, if I use that word, then, you know, it's going to add value to what I'm saying. But actually, it diminishes your voice because, like,
mm,
I only hear one person. I hear
mhm,
several people, right, when they say quantum leap. It doesn't bring, like, oh, this is Eden,
mm, mhm,
right? So for me, that's like one of the biggest symptom. And I guess my advice would be I fucking love threads, right? It's just I have
mm,
no attachment whether someone like gives me a like or not. But on
mm,
Instagram, it's just we've been kind of conditioned to like, okay, you know, likes equals reach equals clients, right?
mm,
Something like that. But on Threads, it's like when I started in that space, I was like, I have too much to say, and this is just like my notepad version of it getting published instead of dying in my
Mm.
graveyard of notes.
Mm-hmm.
So for people that want to like are feeling that little nudge to like express themselves, I would experiment trying out in like threads, like a more short form kind of content
Mm.
platform,
Mm-hmm.
and just notice like, what do you have to say? Like that's all I want you to think about. Like what do you have to say? You can say that I have a stomach ache. Like that's still important. Like share it. Like
Yeah.
just random shit, just share it. And then you'll slowly find the courage to like share a little bit more, right? You can't
Mhm.
just, although I believe in the concept like 10x is better than 2x, sometimes for others it isn't.
I love that. That is like not the answer I expected. And I love it because I think like I forget about threads. I remember her like every 6 months. And then I like go on and I have a day where I just like don't shut up on it and then I forget about it. But it every time I do log into it, it really does feel like this weird corner of the internet where anything goes. Like I'm like, there's no pressure to show up in a certain way. There's no expectation of content. And let's say you are someone that is like, let me just start speaking up. Like, let me just like practice even just saying things out loud. You could log in and have zero followers. Like you could practice saying these things truly with like no consequences.
Yeah.
um which there's not a lot of spaces on the internet to do that. Like truly. Um
Mm-hmm.
especially Instagram, which like that's a whole other conversation. So I love this idea of almost having like
A
an
fresh
online,
start.
yeah, like an online journal of sorts where you just like practice speaking up, no consequences, and
Mm-hmm.
like, um, or at least like no, no expectations. Like there's not going to be this huge expectation
Mm-hmm.
for this platform. Um, I love that. Is there like practices that you do? Either daily, weekly, monthly, whatever timetable feels best for you. But like how do you keep up this practice of like self-expression or self-care or
Mm-hmm.
self-love? Like do you have certain tools in your toolbox that you really reach for?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the biggest, like, I guess, metabolizers of my self-love journey would be dancing.
Oh, I love.
Um, yeah, so I do some chair dance and some like central floor work. It was pretty accidentally how it happened.
Mm.
I signed up for pole class and then I was like, fuck, this is hard. I have no upper body strength.
Pole is
So I go to
crazy.
the reception and I'm like, hey, I'm dying. Do you have an easier, class? You already paid for everything. And they're like, maybe you like chair dance. I'm like, okay, cool. There's a chair. Like I can sit down on that. That's fine, right?
Mm.
And then I started it and I was like, ooh, this is pretty fun. Um, it was awkward at first. I was like, ooh, I didn't know my hips could move this way, and stuff like that. But I think the hardest part of it was looking at myself in the mirror.
Mm.
As someone that struggled with like an eating disorder when I was younger, I was never someone who was like hottie, like go to the mirror like, hey, baddie. I was never that type of person. So looking at the mirror during dancing, where my body doesn't know how to do things, made it so, so awkward. I was like, what are you doing? Um, but yeah, I guess after 2 years of doing that, I guess I've seen some really huge like progress. You could say. Yeah.
Wait, I love that. It's actually one of my goals this year to also start pole. Or at least try it. I have a friend that does it and she taught me like a couple basics because she has a pole in her room. And it was crazy. It's so hard. They make it look so easy. But no, I mean, yeah, that
Do
that was one of my
it.
goals for this year is like really connecting with my body in a new way and challenging myself to kind of like you said like almost be bad at something or like have something
Mm-hmm.
be really difficult because oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
I've found that I and people I know when it comes to like hobbies or self-care or
Mm,
self-expression, we very naturally, as is only human nature, like lean into expressions that maybe we already have
mm-hmm,
a skill with or like a tendency to
mm,
be good at. Like, I grew up in the arts, so like I when I try to do self-care, like self-love or self-expression, I naturally lean for the arts. And like
mm,
I had this realization like a year or two ago. I was like, I'm only like pushing myself in areas I know I already can kind of do okay at. Like, I'm not truly pushing myself. Like, I'm not letting myself be terrible at something. And
mm-hmm,
so that was kind of my goal with pole was like one to connect with my body, but two to be like, let me be bad at something and like
mm-hmm,
have to look at myself in the mirror and like be okay with that and like
mm-hmm,
learn to love this version of me that sucks at something and like
mm-hmm.
that's
I love
okay.
it.
But yeah, I also like I love your thought about like getting used to staring at yourself in the mirror because I think that was a huge turning point in my self-love journey as well, was realizing how much I avoided looking at myself and how much I didn't want to connect with the person in the mirror. And that's a really big mind fuck, honestly, to like get comfortable with that.
I think mirror work is the biggest like catalyzer for these things, and I think it's like the most underutilized like tool. And I think with the everything going on in the personal development space, it's like, you need this course, you need this like somatic stuff, like which I am also into, but sometimes you just have to go out there and just fucking do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
No more courses, just go out there, take a class, do something weird, do something
Mm,
uncomfortable. I don't know.
yeah, I've I would love to like hear your thoughts, yeah, on like experimentation, on like what you kind of think about it, maybe your experience with it, because like yeah, that was a really big thing for me like over the last year was just like I have read every self-help book under the sun. I'd be going to therapy weekly. I'd be investing in manifestation courses, and it was like I put myself in school, but like would never let myself graduate. Like I was just like, we're
Mm,
gonna keep studying so that we never have to actually put this into practice. And it was such a big like wake up call to just like one day be like, I'm done learning. Like I need to actually like do something with all of this. Like not to say like, you should always be learning, but like that was all I was doing. Like no
mm-hmm,
practice, just
mm-hmm,
learning.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's like experimentation look like for you, or like how do you encourage your clients to do that?
I think I always tell my clients like, when you ask me something, if it's too edgy or sassy, just fucking post it. That
Mm,
means we're gonna post it. That means you can't change it.
mm-hmm,
Because I think experimentation, like I guess engaging with your
mm-hmm,
own self-expression and like seeing what you have to say, like that all begins in experimentation, right?
mm-hmm,
There's no rule book for self-expression. And I think that's something really important that people need to know.
mm-hmm,
I think when I first heard of self-expression in the space, it looked a certain way. Like there was only a certain type of people like speaking about it and talking about it. And I was like, am I qualified to talk about this? And I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna experiment on my own, see what I gotta say. And that's how I landed on like such a, I guess, aggressively me profile. Someone
mm-hmm.
said it was very aggressively Colleen, so like, I'll
I
take it.
love.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, and just being willing to, I guess, be that kid again, you
Mm,
know? I think we're so caught up in like, okay, I have to get this right. I have to get my content right. I have to get like all my graphics right, everything right. And then when something goes wrong, you get so like uncomfortable and like, ooh, like when you were a kid, you didn't know how to ride a bike when you were born,
mm-hmm,
right? And you were okay with learning that. So how
mm-hmm.
can you bring back that like feeling of being okay with not knowing something,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that is such
failing,
a
as you
like,
said?
yeah, that's like such a skill we have as children that we kind of let go of is just like
Mm,
kids will try anything like and they do not care that they're bad at it or like it doesn't even cross their mind like it's just like okay like yeah it didn't work out like which is such a like beautiful and admirable trait I think of like children and like something that like we definitely need to work on kind of bringing back as adults. Do you think like have you been met with people not liking you or like your form of self-expression or like what you have to say? Um, and how have you dealt with that? Because I think that's everyone's fear is, getting canceled, getting,
mm.
horrible comments, blah, blah, blah. And like I I'm a very outspoken person. I truly will say whatever is on my mind and I know but I remember like the first time I really started showing up online doing that and like the hate that I got and it was really jarring. Like it is really jarring. So like now I'm in the practice of it. Like my life has been online for like 10 years. So people not liking me or like having things to say about me, I'm just kind of like, okay, sure. Like, but how did you like have you been met with that? And if so, like, how do you recommend prepping for it, dealing with it? Like, what does that process look like for you? Because you are always going to upset someone. I think that's like something
Mhm.
like that's so necessary to like come to terms with when you're putting your life online and like your thoughts online is like there will be someone that disagrees and like that day will come eventually. So like how have you dealt with that?
I think, okay, those are like a couple of points. So
Yeah, sorry.
first, yes.
That was such a like train that was stream of consciousness vibes. So please get whatever you need out of what I just said.
No worries. So I think no, because I have ADHD, so I'm like, okay, which one do I do first?
No, same. And that's
Um,
why there was 30 questions.
okay, I will have 30 answers for you. So I think the first thing would be like just maybe thinking from a standpoint that it will happen, not that, oh no, will it happen? It will happen. It's just more like how are you working on yourself before that happens?
Mm-hmm.
Is I think the perspective that I went in with. And it has happened. People have DM'd me privately about things I've said that have offended them, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something I said like I think 2 months ago. I was like, there's a fine line between like, self-expression and just being an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when the intent behind it, behind what you're saying is like you like really just genuinely like sharing an opinion with no intent to hurt someone, then that is self-expression to me. But if the
Mm-hmm.
intent is like to belittle someone or make fun of their ideas or whatever, and I think that's being an asshole.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I've really just were some people I'd be like, okay, we can just agree to disagree. But if I've said something that was like, oh, it came out so like crass, because sometimes stream of consciousness is just me and threads.
Mhm.
So then I do like take accountability for what I say.
Mm.
It was not supposed to land that way, but I'm sorry I hurt you,
Mhm.
right? And I think just being able to, I guess, be humble as well and be like, no, this is my space, my right to say this and that. Yes, it
Mhm.
is. But like if it truly hurts someone's feeling, I think like that is their feelings,
Mm.
right?
Mhm. Oh, I love that. I think like when you start sharing your thoughts online, yeah, like kind of like you said, like one, you have to understand that there will be assholes. Like I have had people respond to me in ways where I'm like, this, you weren't interested in a conversation. Like you were just interested in being mean. And like
Mm,
that is a thing that will happen when you put yourself out on the
mm,
internet. But
mm,
it's also like putting my life on the internet. I haven't like had this train of thought in a like minute, maybe ever. So thank you for saying all this. I'm like, it's prompting a lot inside of me. It's like it's been a really beautiful self growth journey. And like there have been people that have been willing to give me feedback or their thoughts in a
Mm,
really like respectful, conversational way. And it's given me the opportunity to learn more and
mm,
apologize and be like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Like, even though that wasn't my intention for it to come across that way, it did. Like,
mhm,
thank you for letting me know. Like, I can now move with like more intention around this subject or like educate myself on this subject. So I think it's like you kind of have to have thick skin for the assholes. But yeah, I love what you're saying about like also be open to learning more and growing.
mhm,
Like, even though we are expressing ourselves, like none of us are perfect. We will execute things or say things that are either uninformed or maybe could have landed a little bit more gracefully. And like, what a amazing opportunity it is to like have conversations with people that help us grow. Like, that's a really cool part about putting your thoughts online is like that
mhm,
opportunity to connect with people more and grow more and educate yourself more.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think like being online gives you that chance into tapping into other people's like perspectives. And then you
Mm,
expand your own perspectives, right? I think like before social media exploded, I think we were all just living in our own like bubbles,
mhm,
right? It was just very bubbly.
mhm.
Um, so just being open to that as well, I think is really important.
Yeah.
I think there will be people who will have something to say and take things out of context. I think an example would be one time I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe people are still using the re on emails as a headline."
Oh, mhm.
I was like, I fucking hate that shit. And then all these like bros who aren't in the coaching space are like, oh, she's so dumb. She didn't know it's like blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bro, I'm talking about the online coaching space where,
Mhm.
people use it to get people to open the email. And I was
Mm,
just like,
mhm.
whatever. They're irrelevant to me. It's not relevant to my space. So mute,
Mm.
mute, mute, mute.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm like, people need to be reminded of the power of blocking and muting. Like, it, I actually have been having a lot of conversations with one of my friends this week about how we both had interactions with someone that was very mean, but like we it sounds harsher than I like it sounds harsh with no details, but like details aren't necessary for this space. But like it was like someone we didn't really respect. Like we didn't like them or respect them based on like their own life decisions. And it, we've been having this conversation about like when people we don't respect or like don't want to be like have really nasty things to say, it doesn't matter. Like it truly doesn't matter. Like it's something that should and we should get in the habit of just rolling off our back. Like, I'm like, if I don't want to be like you, I don't necessarily need to be hurt by your opinions, especially when delivered incorrectly. Like, if you're, there's something to say about respectful feedback, obviously, like, always take that into account. But, like, if someone's just being nasty, which happens often online, like, again, like, I mean, the bros love to hop in there. I'm like, the bros always have something to say. Um, but I'm like, I don't know you. I don't want to be you. You don't know me. So like whatever you have to say right now as a comment or a DM, like it has nothing to do with me. It's actually like none of my business. And like the mute and the block button is there for a reason. And like, I love a block. You'll eventually get kind of like trigger happy with it, honestly. Like I'm like one comment comes through and I'm like block by. Like, it gets easier with time. So no, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's not relevant to you or your space, like you're not mandated to listen to those people nor allow them to have like constant access to berating you, I think is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
protect your own peace on that. Like I talk a lot online about like leaving my super religious like childhood and like getting divorced and coming out and like those are controversial topics. And so like I have had my fair share of people that get nasty. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, it's just a block button. It's just, that's all that needs to happen. And you just like let it roll off your back.
Yeah, I think it's like this came up to me while you were sharing that. I was like, blocking is self-love, right? It is a form of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're protecting your peace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just like when you step on like, I don't know, dog poop on the street. You don't think about the dog poop the entire day, right?
No.
You wipe it off or you throw the fucking shoe, right? Whatever will make you happy. And I think it's just like people are like, oh, you shouldn't block. It just shows you can't handle a hard conversation. But the question is, do I want to have a conversation with them? Like, do I want to spend my energy having a conversation with these irrelevant people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I really love what you shared. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm like, yeah, I love the shoe analogy. Yeah. It's like you just fix it and you move on and you're done. Um, what has been like, as we kind of like wrap up and reach the end, like what has been your favorite thing that you have discovered about yourself or like found within your self-love journey, like as you've developed a business that surrounds this, as you've challenged yourself to speak up more in online spaces, and I'm expecting in real life spaces as well. Like, what is your favorite thing that you've either learned about yourself, about this practice? Like, yeah, I would just love to hear like your favorite things about like keeping self-love and self-expression like top of mind. And it sounds like almost everything you do.
Hmm. I think is my favorite thing is that how when I started my self-love, self-expression journey, it was all online, right?
Mm,
But then I was like, there's a disconnect in my real life. But then that courage I got online, I was able to translate offline. And they just kind of fed into each other,
mm,
right? And then that's how I became aggressively me on the
mm-hmm,
space. And yeah, so I think just, if you feel like you're doing too many hot takes online or doing a lot of unpopular opinions, but you feel like you're not that in real life, try it out. Like try it out with your neighbor who's nosy. Say
mm,
something, like just do something little that will make you feel like, oh, I am that person who's saying these things online.
mm-hmm. No,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I'm like, it's just little practices and like slowly integrating it in your real life. And yeah, I think like it's so important to remember like for anyone listening that maybe does not speak up literally ever, it's muscle memory. Like I remember a time of my life where like I couldn't say shit in response to anyone. Um and it's so funny, like I'll talk about that with my friends that I've met in the past year or two, and they're like, I can't even picture a version of you that doesn't say what they're thinking or like speak up for things. Because like I'm that person where if something like someone even I hear someone saying something inappropriate, I will jump in and be like, absolutely not. Like, we're not doing that. So like it's muscle memory and it's a muscle that you'll flex and build. It's like going to the gym. And like one day there will be a day where you don't even think twice about like speaking up for yourself and speaking up for others. And I think that's also a huge motivating tool is like learning to speak up for yourself will lead you to also be able to speak up for other people and to like
Mm.
create change in the world and like help people that maybe aren't there themselves. And I think that's also a beautiful gift to bring to the world that like you can't do until you experience it within yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that for sure. Because like, integration is everything. And as you shared earlier, like you can spend time learning all the shit.
Mm,
But if you're not like, applying it in the real world, in your real life, there's gonna be some resistance and dissonance,
mm-hmm,
um, both in your content
mm.
and in your life. So
In
yeah.
your life, yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and like sharing all of this, sharing your wisdom and your experience. Like, it's been so lovely chatting with you. I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode. Obviously we will link like where to find you in the show notes, but can you let us know really quick like where to find you in the online space?
Yeah, for sure. So my handle is at selfishly expressed. I'll be sharing my Substack link as well, where I have my unfiltered thoughts beyond IG. So I call it like my space beyond the content pillars,
I
basically.
love that so
Um,
much. Uh,
thank
That's
you.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been incredible. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.